Good afternoon and welcome to this briefing hosted by the Jerusalem Press Club. I'm Esti Yaari, Press Director at JPC. Israel commemorates Holocaust Remembrance Day this evening, and unusually this year, does so when it is more than 200 days into a war that started with the most singularly horrific act of violence against Jews since the Holocaust. Our special guest on the eve of this solemn day is Dani Dayan, Chairman of Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center and Israel's National Holocaust Memorial. Before directing Yad Vashem, Dayan served as Israel's Consul General in New York, and prior to that, he served as chairman of the Yesha Council. Hello, Mr. Dayan, and thank you very much for giving us some time on what I know is a very busy day.
Indeed, the busiest day in the year, but I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you. I want to jump right in, again, cognizant of your time. And with the passage of time and the diminishing number of survivors, I want to start with how Yad Vashem is adapting its approach to ensuring that the Holocaust remains relevant and impactful for younger generations. And at the same time, in this climate of denial that we currently live in, where acts committed on camera on October 7th are already being denied, how can we ensure that the memory of the Shoah and events from the last century will not be forgotten or denied?
Well, indeed, we are in a very, I would say, a very dramatic moment. The Jewish people is at this time waging two simultaneous wars: the physical war against those that try to annihilate physically the state of Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and others, their proxies, and worldwide, the war against the Jew, the rampant anti-Semitism. And in another sense, we are approaching, unfortunately, but also inevitably, the post-survivors era. We all grew up listening to the stories of actual survivors, of actual witnesses. I hope it will take many years, but at some point, we will have to be the witnesses. So yes, we are trying to adapt our methods to that future. I suspect that when that happens, that will be the happy hour of the denialists and the distortionists. So our mission will be, on one hand, much more challenging. On the other hand, it will be much more vital, much more important. People ask me sometimes why, for instance, we continue in Yad Vashem to search archives all over the world for additional documents, for additional artifacts. We have in our archive close to 200 million pages of documents. So people ask me sometimes, what's the difference between 200 million and 300 million? And I think that's a lot of difference, because it's not a question of numbers. It's a question we have to be on the most solid and most authoritative database of documentation of facts about the Holocaust, because at some stage those will be the witnesses, the documents. We are also in a race against the calendar in order to gather, to take testimonies from survivors that didn't give testimony yet. But Esti, I never forget, not even for 1 second, that there were 6 million victims that were never able to sit in front of a camera and give testimony, or even to write their testimony, because they were assassinated in Auschwitz, in Babi Yar, in Treblinka. So the work that we have to do is extremely important. The research that converts the documentation into knowledge. And so the 3 steps: gathering the documentation, research that makes that data into knowledge, and then we have to spread that knowledge in order to educate.
Indeed, certainly education, I think, part of it, and which brings me to another aspect of what we're seeing happening today. With the immense outbreak of anti-Semitism on campuses, particularly American Ivy League universities, can we say that some of these lessons and ideas have been forgotten or are being perhaps misunderstood? Some of these people who are participating in these events are soon going to be the next generation of American leaders. I know you've spoken out about this as chairman of Yad Vashem. You've written to the president of Colombia and have spoken also about the need to protect Holocaust memorials, for example, from demonstrators and not to cover them up. Just wonder if you can expand on some of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, you know, Esti, I know quite intimately the Ivy League, the elite universities, especially in the East Coast, from my days in New York as consul general. I was also in charge of Pennsylvania, so in Philadelphia and other places, and in New Jersey with Rutgers and Princeton. And also because I am the proud father of a graduate from Columbia University. My daughter was very active in an pro-Israel advocacy, so I knew the hardship she had. But what is happening now is something completely different. Look, I don't like to use this term, but what we are saying is a cancerous process. I witnessed when I was in New York a few years ago as consul general, as a diplomat, I witnessed stage one. It was relatively mild. Referendums among the students for BDS and some demonstrations, nasty demonstrations, but nothing exceptional. After October 7th, I traveled to New York and Philadelphia to see myself what is happening in the campuses. And I saw stage two, which was much more vociferous, much more hateful. And when I met the presidents of Colombia and UPenn, the then president of UPenn, she resigned since then, I told them that if they don't stop this process now, it will metastasize into stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 3 is already here, is the violent, the violence that we saw in the last weeks. But you know, if even now they don't stop it and we reach stage 4 that is terminal, I think that this time will not be terminal for the Jews. It will be terminal for the colleges. It will completely ruin the higher education system of America. You know, there is some kind of romantic belief that causes promoted by students and by intellectuals are always good causes, positive causes. Sometimes they are ahead of their time, but they are ultimately good causes. Nothing is farther from the truth. I reminded the presidents of those universities that the mob that burned books written by Jews in Universitätsplatz in front of the University of Heidelberg and in front of the University of Berlin were the students and the professors of those universities. And I think that the presidents of those universities that right now are acting basically like traffic officers who can enter the campus, who is denied entry from the campus, police in, police out, Zoom or frontal teaching. Those are administrative, petty administrative decisions. What we should expect from them, should demand from them actually, is leadership decisions. And not only educational leadership, but moral leadership. And what we should demand from them is to exclude calls for the elimination of the state of Israel from the legitimate discourse in those places. Only when they decide like homophobia, like racism, like misogyny, calls for the elimination of the Jewish state is out of boundaries in their institutions, that they will start a long and arduous process to heal those universities. And it's for the sake of those universities, because look, we Jews are now in a different position. We are no longer going to be the canary in the coal mine that perishes in order to alert the societies. We will not perish this time. But the anti-Semitism is definitely a red light that should alert the societies and the institutions that they have a very, very serious problem.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think part of that is, the discourse that we're hearing all around. And, today we are about to begin the day commemorating the murder of some 6 million Jews in Europe, a crime that led to the coining of the term genocide. Today we hear that term being used quite often, and I'm wondering if you can comment perhaps on the use or overuse.
Well, actually, I must admit that contrary to what many think, we are not experts in genocide in Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem is an institution dedicated to the 6 million Jews that were murdered in the Holocaust. Sometimes that position is misunderstood. We believe that 6 million Jews that were massacred in the Shoah deserve an institution that is solely dedicated for them. That's the reason, for instance, that we do not mark in. We, for instance, advise the Kigali Museum in Rwanda that commemorates the Rwandan genocide. We advise them how to. Unfortunately, we are the utmost experts in commemorating tragedies, but we will not have in Yad Vashem an exhibition about the genocide in Rwanda. Not because we are not sensitive to that, but because we decided that as I said, 6 million Jews deserve a place that is dedicated solely to them. But that said, you don't need to be an expert in order to understand that those that refer to the defensive war of Israel in Gaza as genocide are saying something completely absurd, something completely detached from the facts, a cheap propagandistic way to demonize Israel.
Thank you. I have a follow-up here from someone who's asking about the comparison between the anti-Semitism of the Nazis in terms of their eugenics and pseudoscience-based and all the things that impacted their anti-Semitism and modern anti-Semitism. Particularly taking your comparison, using your cancer comparison a step further. What is the cure this time? They're asking.
Well, anti-Semitism is changes shapes and ways every single time that it appears. Sometimes it's religious anti-Semitism, sometimes it's racial anti-Semitism, sometimes it's political anti-Semitism. Sometimes we are the capitalists of the world, sometimes we are the Bolsheviks of the world. So really, anti-Semitism, the attempt to try to explain what are the sources of anti-Semitism is doomed to fail. But what we should do, as always, is to stand strong with our truth, and not to be deterred by anti-Semites. This time, as I said, the situation is different. We have an independent state. We have a sovereign state. People ask me also, for instance, if October 7th is a continuation of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. And I was one of the things that the historians of Yad Vashem taught me is that you can compare every single pair of events can be compared with one condition, that you state what are the similarities, but also what are the differences. And yes, there are similarities, of course, the cruelty, the sadism, the intentions. There is no doubt that Hamas would have assassinated us all if they could. But there are huge differences. Look, the first responders, the Kitot Konenut, as we call them in Hebrew, and the soldiers and policemen that came to Be'eri and Nir Oz and Nahal Oz and Sderot and Ofakim on that October 7th are not Mordechai Anilevich or Pavel Frankel in the Warsaw Ghetto. Not because the heroism is the same heroism, the bravery is the same bravery. but the purpose was different. Anilevich fought in order to die with dignity. Our soldiers fought in order to save lives, and indeed they saved lives, and to repel the enemy and to extol a price from our enemies. In the 1930s, in the 1940s, all we could is to beg Roosevelt and Churchill to bomb the railways conducting to Auschwitz. Now we do what we consider necessary in order to defend ourselves, and we are not anymore at the mercy of others. That's the reason also that after many hesitations, I even criticized my good friend Ambassador Erdan, our ambassador in the United Nations, when he donned a yellow patch in his lapel, because I thought it's the wrong sign. We are not at the mercy of others. The yellow star is the sign of being at the mercy of others, Jewish weakness, of Jews being at the mercy of others. Now we are not, on the opposite. We have a strong army and a strong air force. Let's not forget that. And so that's the big difference between then and now.
Yes, and in fact, one of the reporters is asking about using the term of Shoah to refer to October 7th, and I think based on what you just said.
Yeah, I think that's, I will say more than that. Not only that it's not a continuation of the Shoah, it's not an Holocaust. I think that I would say it this way, Esti. Look, I remember in June or July 2022, President Biden visited Yad Vashem. And I had, I think, 1 minute to be alone with him. I escorted him alone from the motorcade to the Hall of Remembrance, where the president, the prime minister of Israel, were waiting for President Biden. And I told him, Mr. President, Israel was not established because of the Shoah. Israel was established in spite of the Shoah. But you cannot understand the Israeli society, you cannot understand the Israelis without understanding the impact that the Shoah has in the present on all of us. I think that the Shoah is omnipresent here somewhere in the back of our heads of every Israeli, every Jew. So when October 7th came, that morning, that terrible morning, I recall that thing I said to President Biden, because of course, when we heard the reports of mothers muffling the mouths of their toddlers in order to prevent them from crying and not be discovered by their assailants and assassinated, of course that the associative thought was Anne Frank in the attic, or a Jewish child in the barn in a barn in Ukraine. But this is completely different, and basically it's not only different, it's also counterproductive, because basically we are playing into Hamas's hands by saying that we are seeing here is a continuation of the Shoah. Hamas, a terror organization, wants to terrorize us. I think there is nothing that could terrorize Israelis more than being convinced that we are back in the concentration camps, the ghettos, and the extermination camps of Europe in the 30s and 40s. We are not.
Thank you very much. Question has come in also about the efforts to educate the Arab world about the Holocaust in the last few years, particularly with the advancement of the Abraham Accords. And I know that Yad Vashem has a website in Arabic and has done work in Arabic as well. Has the clock turned back since after the war in Gaza, given the spread of disinformation in these countries since October 7th?
Well, yes, we try to, as you said, we have not only a website, but also educational curriculums in Arabic. the Abraham Accords opened for us possibilities. We had some contacts with the UAE in that respect. We had visitors from Abu Dhabi, from Dubai, from Bahrain, from Morocco, and even from other European Arab countries that do not have diplomatic relations with Israel. But there is so much to do yet that we haven't even started to tackle this important issue. You mentioned Holocaust denial earlier, and probably will surprise you. I think that in most parts of the world today, Holocaust denial, outright Holocaust denial, is not a serious problem. No serious leader, journalist, intellectual will claim in 2024 that the Holocaust didn't happen, as it happened in the 70s and the 80s of the previous century. We forget, for instance, there was a famous trial with David Irving, a Holocaust denier, against Deborah Lipstadt. Those are things that don't happen today, for sure, in the Western world. Unfortunately, in the Muslim world, there are still significant islands in which Holocaust denial, outright Holocaust denial, is prevalent. That includes Iran, that includes places like Malaysia, that includes Islamic universities across the Muslim world, and we have to find the way. It's difficult because they don't want to listen, but we have to find the ways to combat that with our allies in the Arab world. I can mention our colleague Ahmad al-Mansouri, for instance, in Dubai, that opened the first gallery about the Holocaust in a museum in Dubai. Really a trailblazer in that respect, but we need much more Ahmad al-Mansouris in the Arab world that will do themselves that work. When I say that Holocaust denial, outright Holocaust denial, is relatively minor today, except, of course, in the lunatic fringes of the social media, that you can find any kind of garbage there. But I'm talking about serious persons. On the other hand, we have a very serious issue with Holocaust distortion and Holocaust trivialization. And Holocaust distortion is so grave because in many cases it's promoted by governments or by strong political or social forces that claim that, for instance, that in their countries, their citizens, all of them help the Jews, which is, of course, nonsense. Or it's even what we see now in Russia and Belarus, going back to the old bad Soviet ways of de-Judaization of the Holocaust, talking about massacre, genocide of Soviet citizens instead of talking about the Jews, the massacre of the Jews. We see that in many countries, especially in Eastern Europe, but we see those symptoms also in Western Europe. I want to remind you that there was a presidential candidate in France that claimed that the Vichy regime was benevolent towards the Jews, was helpful to the Jews, which is, again, a complete fallacy.
Indeed, and I know that this has also been a case, for example, with discussions in Poland on how to refer to the Shoah and crimes that took place there.
Of course, but everybody says Poland, and probably rightly so, but Poland is not alone.
Okay. Do you think that Israel should be, one of the journalists following up, should be doing more on this issue with Eastern European nations, Poland and others, perhaps?
Yes, I think that we do. I always say that we are, of course, Israeli patriots, but when there is a conflict between historical accuracy and the Israeli diplomatic interests, we stand with historical accuracy. And not only in the more famous cases of Poland, but recently there was a case with the previous Bulgarian government in which they highlighted, for instance, only the fact that the Bulgarian Jews were spared deportation and murder, but they failed to mention that Bulgaria was facilitated the deportation of the Jews of Thrace and Macedonia that were occupied territories by Bulgaria. So we demanded from them, on one hand, we commended Bulgaria for that the Jews from Bulgaria proper were saved, but we also have to remind that there were also extremely dark spots that should be mentioned too.
Being mindful of your time, I'm going to just ask two more questions, and then I'm going to let you go on because I know that there's a lot you have to do. One question is coming in about the sources of anti-Semitism today, whether you see a difference in right-wing or left-wing anti-Semitism, whatever that may mean, in terms of the characterization of anti-Semitism.
Well, you know, I think that anti-Semitism is one of those cases that prove the so-called horseshoe theory that claims that ultimately extreme left and extreme right joint forces are much closer than you tend to believe. In anti-Semitism, that is very clear, that right-wing neo-Nazi anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism that calls itself progressive, I don't understand what is progressive with that, but what progress is with that. But they join forces and basically they have synergy between them. Those that marched in the University of Virginia in Charlottesville with Nazi flags chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and those that marched yesterday, that was a few years ago in 2017, I believe, and those that marched yesterday in the University of Virginia and Charlottesville, calling basically for the elimination of the State of Israel. They may differ in their political affiliations, they may differ in their preferred candidates for president, but they harbor the same hatred towards Jews, and basically they have a implicit synergy between them that is really abhorrent.
Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up with a question about Yad Vashem's theme this year. I know Yad Vashem has chosen for this year's theme for Holocaust Remembrance Day a focus on the destroyed Jewish communities, which perhaps has some added resonance this year. Yeah. And I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, you know, Esther, it's hard to believe, but we choose that theme as the annual theme for Tafshir Pei Dalet for 2024, long before October 7th. I think it was in June or July 2023. And, you know, there is a quote by a Jewish Dutch survivor, Abel Herzberg. He says, it is not, the Holocaust is not the murder of 6 million Jews, but it's rather 6 million murders of one Jew each. And I, of course, adhere to that, and we try to give back a persona, a face, a name, a personality to each one of the victims. But that quote misses one block of the puzzle, and this is the Jewish communities. Thousands of Jewish communities were devastated in the Shoah. Most of them disappeared forever and exist now only in memory books, in history books. And the community, the Jewish community, is a unique creation of the Jewish people. There is nothing like that in other peoples. The fact that each Jew, the community feels responsible for each other, each member of the community responsible for each other, the education, tradition, etc., etc. The Jewish community is something extremely special. And thousands of them were devastated in Europe and in Northern Africa. So we thought that this year we should remember especially them. Then came October 7th, as you said, as the aptly said, that gained an additional significance because unfortunately also now Jewish communities were devastated, although in this case, I'm sure they will be rebuilt and flourish.
Thank you very much, Chairman Dayan, for this
Thank
briefing. Just a few hours before the official opening events for Holocaust Remembrance Day gets underway at Yad Vashem. Very much appreciate your time and for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all for joining us, and feel free to reach out if the JPC can be of any assistance. Thank you.